same old to say to you. Girl, we couldn't get much higher. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
Hey everybody, welcome to Friday PM. We've got a great show for you tonight. Other than my first guest, we're also going to have some great other guests. Warren Edgar is going to be with us later on to talk about pathways to progress. We're also going to be talking to the Portland extrovert, Jamie Terrellin, a little bit about the exciting things to do downtown at night. But our first guest, my friend Wayne. Wayne, good to see you, the lead singer of the Lords. Wayne he's like Madonna. He goes by one name all the time. But tell the fans what your last name is, Wayne, so they can look you up.
It's Wayne Roberts.
Wayne Roberts. Not to be confused with Wayne Rogers.
Oh, no.
Which I feel like might have
MASH.
been a MASH guy. Exactly. So, Wayne, you're from Portland, not Portland, but from Maine.
I was born in Portland.
Born in Portland? Okay.
But I grew up in Gray.
Gray, Maine?
Mm-hmm.
So, not far from Portland. Now, you're a musician, podcaster, comedian, vocalist, a lot of things.
Jack of all trades,
Jack of all
master of
trades.
none.
Exactly.
Absolutely
do a lot of things,
none.
Right. Yes, well, master of a lot of things, I think. But
I like that. I once heard somebody say, "I'd rather know a lot about a little about a lot than a lot about a little."
Yeah, it makes you more kind of diverse. It's almost like when you see stuff about breeding of dogs, a breed of a dog that's all one breed, they don't have that same immunity and strength. So when you have a lot of different things, it gives you diversity.
Yeah, the mutts are the
mutts, exactly, like all of us, right? I mean, probably from Maine, a lot of us. But I mean, that gives you also a lot of gristle for the podcast because you have a lot of different things to talk about. We'll get to the podcast a little later, but what I want to talk about first was kind of growing up in Maine before you moved away. So you grew up in Maine.
Mostly, halfly. Well, I was born here. I moved to my mom and I moved to Virginia when I was 3. She worked for the government.
Yep.
That's where she met my stepdad, where I get my last name. My dad. No, I mean, he adopted me. We moved back when I was 10 after they split. We moved back here when I was 10. And then, from then till after I graduated high school, I was here.
And it's kind of like, it's funny, I was going to say, like, well, the government was better in those days, but it really wasn't. It was probably exactly the same. We just didn't know as much about it.
Yeah, it was like, you didn't have access like with that phone.
Exactly, to find out exactly what they were all up to.
No, you had to rely on those people that were considered freaks. It turned out to be they were right.
They were right, or the old bookstores and things like that. So at what point did you kind of make the adult move? Like, did you graduate high school and took off? Is that kind of the story? Like you had the backpack and ran out the door? Or?
I kind of took off twice.
Yeah. Okay.
When I first after graduation, a few months after, in September of '89, I left. I went to Australia for 5 months because I'd become really good friends with one of our exchange students.
Yeah.
Who I'm still friends with.
Okay.
And she still has a Miller sign that I gave her, a neon Miller sign that my grandfather fixed out of the dump, and I gave her as a joke. And her kids reminded me, "Oh yeah, Miller sign, it's in our bar." I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, you still have that?
Right.
And she sent me a picture, smiling. Ooh. But because of her, still friends with her. I went there for 5 months, and I came home and back into the snow, and went because I was over there from September to February. It was summertime.
Yeah, exactly, right. Different, totally different.
So I come back, the snow, 2 feet of snow. I can't do this much longer. And my dad had moved from Virginia down to Florida, and I went, I'll see you there in a few months, bub.
Yeah.
So I moved to Florida, the other Hollywood. And,
Florida,
yeah. Yeah, I was there for a decade, or 11 years. That's
11
where my
years.
daughter was born as well.
And your daughter was born there. So what was living in Hollywood, Florida like? I mean, obviously it's very different than Maine. And what's interesting about Florida, too, is, they always say, like, the north of Florida is like the south, right?
Yeah,
the south is like the north, yeah. So, and Hollywood, didn't you say it's not far from Miami or something?
It's in between Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
In Fort Lauderdale. So is it kind of the smaller town type of vibe, or somewhere in the middle? It's a bigger city, or?
No, it's certainly smaller, but it's not like Davie, which is a little bit west of that, which is even smaller, which people from Maine would be more like, oh, that's my kind of place. Davie,
yeah, the
more cowboy boot wearing and folks kind of like that.
Well, in Maine, it's kind of interesting because it's the same thing, isn't it? The more south you get, the more north the culture, and the more north you get, the more south the culture.
I mean, it's funny you brought that up because that's what happened the first time I went to Orlando to go to Disney. Driving up and because we were down there and going that way, and every time we'd stop or whatever, how you doing? I'm like, I thought we were going north.
Right, exactly.
What happened here? Oh, that's right. And anyway, it seemed like we were going south.
Well, I think it's funny where the parallels between a California and a Florida and a Maine, and I'm not sure where else, although I'm sure it'll come to me. But it's because more wealth likes to be by the water. I mean, I think this civilization has always been built on, like, the most wealth is by being by the water, right? Because you can get fish in, and water's nearby, you can grow things. Resources are there, so it becomes a kind of a capitalist system. The more wealthy people, which then are more kind of what we consider north, the more liberal, progressive, they think of themselves as more modern thinking, and then more traditional values, a lot of times aren't always living on the water nowadays. I don't know if that always exists, but that's like Portland. Portland's very expensive now. Miami's very expensive now. It's almost like kind of the average person can't really live in those places as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but Hollywood was a fun time for you? You were young, you were going out?
I don't really remember much of the 90s.
Partying, having fun, yeah, exactly.
Just when I get down there and there's, would you say the Button South is open until 6 a.m.?
Yeah.
We're going.
Yeah.
But I was in my 20s. But no, I was originally, I thought I wanted to be a professional bowler like my dad, just take it the next step further. So I was doing that for a while and then burned out like people told me I would. And I told them I wouldn't, but I did. And then just to quiet my dad, because he wanted me to go to school for something. You forget, because I was also, during the day I was a painter. I was a house painter and apartment repaints. And he said he wanted me to go to school for something, and just to shut him up, I just went, radio.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you gonna do about it? I'll make some calls.
Okay.
Fuck, I guess I gotta go make some calls.
Right.
So I did, and the jock that I talked to when I made the call sent me to a cheap school that she had gone to, and we're still friends. She's been on my podcast a couple times, Kimba. Legend jock in South Florida. 94.9 Zeta.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is, in that school, I met the husband of my podcast producer co-host, Susie, who is also, they didn't know each other at the time, and we didn't know each other. I didn't know Susie until years later, because I was 94. I didn't know her until 98, 99. And then her and I are also, her husband is a guy I went to school with, and we're also birthday twins.
Okay.
Sorry, it took me a minute to spit that out.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's
all these
Susie.
Converging thoughts.
Well, what I like about this story is, rewinding the tape, is so you were thinking follow your dad's footsteps, become a professional bowler. I mean, that's kind of
and I didn't even get close.
Well, but there was a.
I didn't have this head. I didn't have this here. I was an emotional.
Yeah, you have to be pretty focused, right?
I broke my toe kicking my ball bag once.
And got pissed, and you're throwing the ball. Well, because I know the movie Kingpin, obviously we all know, right? But there's an interesting show called Documentary Now, and it's Bill Hader, some guys from Saturday Night Live, and they do these kind of fake documentaries. And one they did was all about the bad boy of bowling. And he was a rock and roller guy, and it was kind of, because in those days, right, there was a lot of guys like
Who did they do it about? Who was it?
It was kind of, it
wasn't a real bowler?
It was, no, but it was kind of based on, And I'll send you the
because my favorite
link,
bowler is Pete Weber, PDW.
And they probably,
who do you think you are? I am.
Well, they probably had seen it because these guys all, like me, we grew up on ESPN in the afternoons and ESPN Classic. And you'd have a lot of these kind of crazy pool shark guys, but the bowler guys, and it's like, I mean, there's two ways to think about it. A lot of times we think about it as like our dad or our grandfather's sport, but there was like guys that were like hellraisers and having a great time doing that stuff too. And so you were you a really good bowler, or?
I was decent. I got good pretty quick because I already from being part jock and also watching my dad all those years, because I grew up in bowling centers, but because my dad had a pro shop and I'd stand there as a little kid while all the ladies kind of gathered around watching. He's so good. Yeah, he is. What are you really watching? The way he stretches?
Right. Well, that's the $1 million.
I spent most of my time in the game room.
The $1 million question, because you were a single guy back then in the 90s,
Sometimes.
Do bowlers get a lot of chicks?
There are bowling groupies.
They're bowling groupies.
Oh, sure.
All right, yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. All right.
Yeah, and
I should have picked up bowling. It might have been better for.
yeah, I mean, depending on the town.
Depending on the
town and the bowling center.
Agree, exactly.
So
It's if you're in the right
it's kind of
place.
like upscale. It's kind of like
Upscale.
strip clubs. I mean, that one where
And was
there's
it-
differences.
Yeah, well, Florida, because Florida's got. I mean, Florida probably has a lot of bowling alleys too, because it's a place to get air conditioning, get out of the heat.
And bowling, there were a lot of in the '90s. There were a lot of big, a lot of guys came from South Florida that made a lot of shows and won a lot of titles.
They got
Steve
really
Wilson,
good.
Bob Vespi, Steve Hoskins. Florida had. It seemed like every show, every Saturday, somebody was from Florida, or at least one or two people were, from
We're
Florida.
from that area. Well, I think there's also
Whether East Coast, West Coast,
East
or
Coast. A lot of sports guys, I think, also are in Florida because of the tax. It's better for taxes. Plus, you can fly anywhere, so it's a good place to bounce. Like I always watch a lot of pro wrestling and a lot of wrestlers, Hulk Hogan, all these guys. They all live in Florida.
I used to joke that tell people
Bubba
that
the
when I
Love
was a kid
Sponge and
that Jake the Snake Roberts was my uncle.
Well, you could pass for him and
I
the same
had
voice.
I would get a scratch over. Damien bit me. Right
Yeah,
here.
exactly. Well, it's like got a little similar look and the same kind of voice and like a laid back, but intensity. You're right. That was Jake the Snake. Yeah, he's an interesting guy with a very interesting story.
Oh, yeah.
Of a lot of demons in his life. But let's talk about the radio days so you went to school because your dad basically said you got to go to school, and you said, hey. Let me check out broadcasting.
Kind of like with William Shatner talking about Star Trek. I was just an actor on a lark.
Yeah,
I just spit it out.
Yeah, and it just happens, right? And one thing leads to the next. So, were you in school for a while before you started, jumping on the air? Did you go to college radio?
Well, we had the good part about that school was it was cheap because it was it was a, what do you call it, a state school or whatever. It was a tech school.
Tech school.
But
yeah.
we had Monday through Friday. We had 2 hours on the air on the NPR station, WLRN.
Okay.
1 p.m. we were live from 1 to 2, and then from at our place, and they piped it in ISDN to their station, and then from 3 to 4 at our place we would record another show that they would also record and play back. That's probably my mom.
Yeah. Set on them. We'll cut that out anyway.
It's,
but yeah,
it's
go ahead.
fine.
Sorry,
I don't know.
yeah.
Who cares? It's fine. It's part of the thing. It's part of the conversation. It happens. I don't remember what the hell I was saying now.
So you guys had a couple of hours on the
Oh,
air every
yeah,
day.
and they would play
yeah.
that 3 to 4 that we recorded. They play it back from 11 to midnight, LRN. So
Yeah.
And everybody had turns. You had a little sign up thing, and somebody jocked, and then somebody did news at 15. Somebody did the sports at 30, and somebody did another news at 45. And I did them all, but mainly wanted to be a rock jock. But then, luckily, I realized that I was getting really tired of doing this shit, and then knowing what was going on and learning more. And I'm like, so luckily I got into talk radio.
Yeah, right.
And learned, Neil Rogers, Phil Hendry. I told you about
Yeah,
Phil
exactly.
Hendry.
Phil Hendry.
Apparently he's got a documentary out. I just saw the other day. Came out a couple weeks ago, last week or whatever. But yeah, I worked with
Art
Phil
Bell
in
kind of
Florida.
guys and all that,
And
right? Those guys, yeah.
I worked with Art Bell,
Yeah, all that.
and that was
Well,
later on.
yeah.
When I moved to California, I worked with Art Bell and George on
George.
Coast to Coast.
I think that was when, because a lot of it was AM, right? For talk, because that was the kind
A
of.
lot of them were, but there
Yeah.
was a lot towards the mid to late 2000s where there was people that talk was getting so good, getting more fun, like with Opie and Anthony and a lot of other things.
That's true,
A lot of
right.
FMs were going talk.
Yeah, you're doing talk radio. What was your style of talk radio? I mean, I feel like a lot of it is politics and things like that. That doesn't seem like you. So you're just
That station, WIOD 610, and at that time with Neil Rogers and Phil Hendry and Rick and Suds, and they were all more fun radio shows. They weren't. We played back. We recorded and played back Dr. Laura. On the overnight, which that was one of my first gigs, and then 10 years later, I actually worked for her. I was her backup producer.
And so Dr. Laura, is that like Dr. Drew and these folks that it's like relationship advice and things like that?
Yeah, you don't remember Dr. Laura?
I feel like that was what it was, right? It was
Go Take on the
relationship
Day.
advice, yeah.
Go Take on the Day.
Yeah.
We had a lot of stuff, not just relationship, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, kind of like, then there was, Phil Harvey or Paul Harvey?
Oh, that was more of a news
Yeah.
commentary thing.
Well, wasn't there a lot of inspirational folks? I mean, Glenn Beck. I mean, it's like
I worked with Glenn.
Right. So
yeah,
you
his
were
producer
bounced
almost
around,
broke
right?
my hand when he shook it.
Yeah, the
Big dude. This
doing
dude
that,
was
right,
6'4".
the iron grip.
Hey, how are you? Oh my God, dude.
I've had one
Still hurts.
guy do that to me, and it was after I can't remember why, but I'd had a very sprained like muscle, probably fell down when I was partying too much or something. And I remember that guy that squeezed, and it was like daggers through my fingers and everything. Because he's, yeah, how you doing? That's the power grip.
Mm-hmm.
So you're working through a lot of different channels on the radio, but you met your wife through that, and that kind of progressed you to another chapter too. Did you
Former
want-
wife, but yes.
Former wife, okay. Well, former wife, if you're out there, you know, he's a good guy. Get back together with him.
Shout out, Mama.
Yeah, shout out. But you met her, and wasn't she doing something that was
She
interesting?
was doing, she was doing talk. She
was doing talk,
She was
yeah.
with another girl. They were called the Super Chicks.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So
Like
and
the
it was
Dixie
sort
Chicks,
of
but
a.
the
They did kind of. They tried to keep it light, but it was. They talked a bit about political stuff or whatever. But at that point, when I met her, then I wasn't producing for. I wasn't really producing for the shows. I had gone into the production department doing more commercial promo and started doing voice stuff, and trying to get used to
And did you
hearing myself on the radio.
you moved to Nashville, correct, at that point?
She got a gig
She
as
got
one
a
of the
gig
VJs
there
on CMT.
On CMT, Country Music Television. And then you were there and doing more voiceover stuff too?
I did voiceover. Was a PA'd a bunch of music videos.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was
country.
in a couple music videos,
Yeah.
but I also had an agent in Atlanta, and I got some film work and TV. I did. That's a fucking funny story. The Dawson's Creek thing, where I got Dawson's Creek, and I got cast as a guy trying to get into Michelle Williams' pants.
Yeah.
And there was another guy cast trying to get into Busy Phillips' pants at this party, whatever. And the guy that I got cast with, we're in the makeup trailer, and the lady's asking him about her, him about himself. And, I've been in Orlando last couple of years, but I'm originally from Maine. And I was like, what'd you say? And he knew, and he told me, where from? And I went, Great New Gloucester. He went, Scarborough. And I went, holy shit.
Yeah, it's like such a small world.
Yeah,
right?
and then we both got thrown around by Jensen Ackles.
Exactly, right.
Welcome to name dropping night.
Welcome to yeah, like that kind of almost like Hollywood South in a sense to in all those areas like because is that in
Wilmington. It was Wilmington, North
yeah,
Carolina.
exactly where they filmed a lot and Dawson's Creek was filmed there. So then you moved to LA for a stint too.
Yeah,
before
for
you
a long
moved back to
time.
you were there in LA.
From 04 to 19.
That's a long
2019.
time, yeah. So that was a big chunk of time.
Yeah.
Like LA, seen changes there since between then and now a lot, or 19 really? You left not that long ago, like right before COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was. I jumped ship just in the nick of time.
And you jumped ship though because you were helping your mom out with the place.
I was
over
that,
there?
but also I was done with the. I was done
Just
with
burnt
LA.
out
I was
on that,
sick
yeah.
of the whole thing and my rent continually going up
Right.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute, I got a house. I'm out of this dump.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And now I'm trying to get my kid. Come on, even though she's in a nice spot though, where she.
and she's still on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Is she still younger or grown?
Just turned 23.
Right. So you're trying to convince her, hey, Maine's got a lot going on, and
Mm-hmm.
now after seeing you on this TV, she'll be like, look, hey, now
Listen to
what's-
Luigi.
This is Luigi. What's your daughter? Is she involved in creative arts too? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she just did something with was in the paper there. Her making her. She's into skateboarding.
Yeah.
And, she made one. Anarchy.
Yeah,
Anarchy.
yeah,
And
okay.
I'm like, boy, I taught that kid well.
Yes, exactly, right. Chip off the old block. So you get back to Maine 2019. I know we're skipping over a few different chapters, but you formed any bands or things before you met the guys in the Lords? We'll show a clip of these guys in just a moment. You want to show a clip now? I think we can get away with a quick
Whatever you
clip.
wanna do. Your
The,
show.
the copyright people will let us get away with a clip of. Let's watch the Lords, a tribute band, not a cover band, a tribute band, because you're not trying to.
We're not a clone.
Not a clone, trying to do their version of some of the Doors. So let's take a look at that. We'll come right back.
Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey
we're back with Mr. Wayne Roberts. Roberts is correct, right?
That is absolutely
Yes.
correct.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about the band, the Lords, how you found these guys. A lot of these guys in the band have been here in Maine playing like forever. That doesn't mean they're older guys, but they've been here for a while. Steve Luttrell, I've known him for many years. Great drummer, really like awesome with a lot of genres. Flash Allen, everybody knows him. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's my age, who took piano lessons from him when he was a kid, and he's a guy my age now. And so everybody knows these guys, but what they didn't know is they were wanting to do a Doors tribute band, and I think that they found you through looking, and you were looking as well. Was that how it all kind of worked out?
Yeah, apparently, yeah. Flash and Steve had a conversation about doing some kind of a Doors thing, and then so Steve put a call out to Dennis, the guitar player. Steve's the drummer, and if you hadn't already said that, sorry. And then gave it to they gave it to Dennis to take care of finding a vocalist.
Right, yeah.
And at the same time, I had just put up an ad because I wasn't doing much. I was just putting the house back together from it being rented out for 30-something years. And I needed some kind of creative outlet. I had stopped doing the podcast, taking another break because one-man show, get sick of yourself after 4 months of doing it. So I'd take breaks here and there. But I wanted some other creative outlet besides the podcast, and I put an ad on Craigslist. I think I said Morrison Van Zant type vocalist looking for players.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then Dennis emailed me, and then we spoke on the phone for an hour, and they invited me to audition, and they keep telling me to come back.
Yeah. Well, it's a funny thing. It's almost like a chicken and an egg. Do you think that they already knew they were trying to do the Doors band when you had said you were trying to do kind of a Doorsy sound, or do you think that they realized it after finding you?
I don't know. I mean,
right.
you made me think of the word synchronicities, and that's
Right,
what I talk
it could have
about a
just
lot
been,
on my
right.
podcast.
Could have been both
And
things, yeah, at the same
everything
time.
that's happened so
Right.
far seems all synchronicitous.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys vibe together so well. It seems like it could be a guys
It's
that
like they could call the band Wayne and his Three Dads.
right, exactly. Well, but I mean, it nobody really seems completely out of sorts with it. Flash is the least kind of grunged out rocker kind of guy, but he really is such a great player that it's really awesome.
He's a great player and a great dude.
Yeah, great guy, exactly. Gives a lot back to the community. So when did you guys start rehearsing? How did that all kind of come about? How long ago was that?
It was 6-7 months ago.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, but we've had probably 2.5 months of that were setbacks with everybody getting sick.
Yeah.
And then Dennis had jury duty
Yeah.
for a little while, and then and other things, weather. Because we only we rehearse once a week. We have Tuesdays. Our Tuesdays are ours at Lenny's at Hawks Plaza,
Yeah.
which we consider with being the Doors tribute, a band to a tribute to the music of the
Tribute
Doors.
to the music of them.
It's our London Fog.
Okay. Okay. And so who? Is it a team? I'm sure it's always a team approach, but do you go about sometimes picking what the songs will be? Because when we saw you guys playing, I said, how about The End, right? And you said, well, that's not exactly on our set list yet, but you got Roadhouse Blues, Whiskey Bar, Love Her Madly, you've got...
A lot.
Yeah, Light My Fire. And they just have a lot more
And the
songs
funny
than
thing
you
is,
even
in the
know.
original conversation with Dennis on the phone before I went and auditioned, I said, I only have one thing. I don't want to do Light My Fire, man. Everybody.
And now you gotta, like,
and
look,
Dennis
we
was
gotta
like,
do
yeah,
it,
me
right.
either.
Right.
And now, but we do it because
Right.
you have to. But
Yes.
it's nice to. It is actually. That was before I ever tried to perform it. And now, of course, after you do it a bunch, when you got those three great guys behind you, of course you want to fucking do that song.
Yeah, I mean, I think I get what you're saying, which is you feel like it's been so done by so many guys in a karaoke bar.
Yeah, I'd rather do some deep cuts.
Deep cuts that you worry that it could seem like, oh, it just sounds like. But when you have the power of those guys playing it, it doesn't sound like anything except for the real song.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't really have to compare yourself to the hundreds of other versions. It's really only one or two up here, like maybe the Doors, and there's probably been some bands maybe you've seen over the years that have covered it, like big bands. I don't know, but I'm sure.
Yeah, that
Stone
song-
Temple Pilots or
that
something.
song has been, dude. Oh my God! I just listened to
some-
Robbie's book.
Right, yeah.
I listened to it 3 times.
Right.
9 hours. You can listen to it on YouTube. Just looking up.
Yeah, that's what I love. Yeah.
And there's a part where he mentions all the people that have cut. He goes through a part where there's a whole chapter just about Light
Really
My Fire, 'cause
good
that was his
bands,
song.
right, yeah.
And all the people that have. There's an opera guy that has done the damn
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Everybody,
I believe it,
and all
yeah.
kinds of different genres have done
Right,
that
right.
song.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons, again, why I was like, can we stay away from it, man? But
Right.
you can't.
Exactly.
Because that's
I
what
mean,
the ladies want to hear anyway.
People want to hear it. People want to hear it. So they can see you guys in a lot of places, but you can find the Lords on Facebook, on social media.
The Lords, Maine, on
Maine.
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And they can look you up
And that's
to
me.
find your
I'm
way
the
to
one.
them. And
I
you're
run
the
social
admin,
media shit,
social
yeah.
media. And look you up too, and it's Wayne Roberts.
On Instagram, Wayne Roberts 811.
811.
And Twitter.
And on Facebook.
And
they
then
can
there's
find
also
you.
the podcast, Waiting Interest Podcast.
Well, that's what I was going to get to was that, well, I agree. So you also have a podcast, and it's called Waning Interest with a Y, right? And so tell us, the viewers, more about the podcast, too. I mean, do you talk about music, talk about current events? What's kind of the...
I talk about a little bit of everything, but I try to, even though I'm considered political, you know, and I
political,
get deep, you know, I know what's going on, and
Deep,
you know, it's all, garbage. And I used to be one that woke up in the morning and immediately had to know everything that's going on, and now I'm the opposite.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. So if I talk about it, it's very quick. If I mention anything on my podcast, I try to keep it all light, fun, and keep it. It's more like a diary.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And
exactly.
and you know, it's all about having fun, laughter. I just consider it my going out. That's the two nights I go out. Instead of leaving the house, I go into the room where I do the little whip headquarters.
And did you say
and have
that...
my drinks with Susie,
To have the drinks with Susie. That you...
who's in Florida.
Yes. And do you do broadcast this live? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Tuesdays, sorry, I spit.
Yep,
Tuesdays
Tuesday.
and Friday nights, sometimes Saturdays, depending on if the Lords have a gig or if, you know, Susie,
And is
we
that
have something else to do on Friday.
Because it's a video podcast.
YouTube.
So it is YouTube Live.
Mm-hmm. And
so they
then
find
the
out.
audio only goes up also on,
Spotify
and
and
Apple and
Apple,
Stitcher and a bunch of others that I'd never even heard of. And
Right.
people contact me, I caught you on blah, blah, blah. I don't put my shit there. But
They figured it out, yeah.
There's all kinds of these things that aggregate it. And
Yeah, and as I've seen a lot of those live, YouTube live, do you have chat enabled? Can people chat and everything? And
that's
read?
part of what Susie does. Is
Yeah,
you know,
she
while
reads the
I'm
chats, right.
babbling,
Yeah.
you know, and about my pinball brain that I call myself.
Yeah. She'll ask you questions from the chat or things like that.
Well, no, she'll just keep an eye on the chat for, you know, spam and garbage, and also let me know, you know, if I'm not paying attention to it, that, you know, there's a good comment to throw up there. And,
Yep,
or whatever.
exactly. And so
And
Wayne,
plus, she murders when she speaks.
Yeah.
She just crushes that guy. She makes me laugh all night. It's hilarious.
That is cool. And so let's talk about, because before the interview, we talked about you have a love of psychedelic mushrooms, a little bit of religion. Well, I said,
Yeah.
let's
It's
talk about...
in the open of my podcast.
It's in the open of your
Jesus
podcast,
was a
yeah.
mushroom. Wayne Jesus was a mushroom. Roberts.
Yeah, well, it's what I'd said before we had the interview is I said, tell the viewers something you're passionate about, and you're passionate about, you know, kind of psychedelics and the religious states you can get. I mean, because I feel the same way, but I think you don't think of it as psychedelics and religion. You think of it as the religious states that can come from psychedelics, or do you think of it as
Both.
both? So
I believe
maybe
all
the
the good
Catholics
books.
can take a few more mushrooms.
All the good books are actually based in the local psychedelic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of, I saw some guys on some podcasts that talk about that too, that think that most spirituality and or even like the birth of our mind as humans came from like
The
monkeys.
spore.
Yeah, monkeys eating mushrooms or something.
That's the Terence McKenna
Yeah, exactly, right.
stoned ape
Yep,
hypothesis.
exactly,
He called
right.
it a theory, but it's actually a hypothesis. But where you know, just foraging and just boom, and then all of a sudden we, you know, Bill Hicks did a bit about it where it was like we went from
Yeah.
I think we can go to the moon.
Right, exactly. Yeah, then it's, I mean, something happened and we don't know what it is, and it could have been mushrooms. Why? So let's ask a question then for me and for the audience. So why is it that, you know, when we know it's something that really has not had that much harm to people, especially psychedelics, LSD, I don't really go out of my way to be a proponent of that because as we all know, you can get some bad stuff and be really messed up from it.
I'd rather stay away from the lab.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's, especially back in the 90s, you know, in college, you end up with some stuff and you're completely freaked out for like the short amount of time, but then it messes you up for like another 6 months or something. I've seen some people get messed up from acid. Never really happened with mushrooms. And so here we are now in the state of Maine and many other states, and people are smoking pot like it's candy, but mushrooms don't seem to be freely legal. And what
They're getting there.
They're getting there.
A lot of places.
The other thing that's kind of an interesting question is, because they probably will be legal soon, why is it that when we were younger, like, it wasn't as easy to just get mushrooms in like a dime bag as it would have been to get pot? You would have think growing magic mushrooms is the easiest thing to do. Anybody could do it in their basement. It just, maybe I wasn't able to find it, but it wasn't like I didn't think it was floating around like easy to get.
It wasn't as easy back then, but it was if you just knew a few things. Because there's cows everywhere. There's cow shit everywhere.
And
all you had to do, you just go pick, and then you do what you have to do with cleaning them, and just there was books, but
so a lot of the
there were
mushrooms
people that did it, but
right. So the mushrooms that were out there, you could have just eaten, but you just didn't know if it was.
You just had to know.
You
You just had to know your stuff with a book, or or learning from somebody who had a lot of knowledge in mycology. I didn't know anything at that time, back then.
Exactly. Yeah. You just buy it.
But when somebody mentioned that, the whole thing with, because my question when it comes back to the religion thing, the reason I say what I say is because my thing always growing up as a kid and as an adult, I don't understand. This virgin birth thing never made sense, and I'm sick and tired of adults thinking that it's real.
Yeah.
Like what explains that? And when somebody finally said, because it's the spore. Spores don't need seed.
Okay.
Oh, Jesus was born in a manger, in a pile of cow dung.
And so that's
died for me. Yeah. So I could chew his, eat his body of his flesh, and shake hands with the universe, and then start talking like Jesus. Because when somebody's tripping balls, who do they sound like? Jesus.
They do get into the Jesus thing. It's true.
And it's the cup. The mushroom is the cup. It's the chalice. And the little thing that they put on your tongue in church. That's a mushroom. So that's a representation of a mushroom cap.
Yeah.
And in a psychedelic mushroom, if you let it grow into a chalice, and you put water in that, let it sit for a while, and you drink that, that's holy water, Holmes.
Right. Yeah. And maybe that accounts for all those crazy costumes they wear in the Vatican.
Look it up.
They were like kind of whacked out at like a rave or something, right?
The Pope dresses like a mushroom.
Right. He does.
Look at just Google pictures of the Pope.
Yeah.
And you'll go, wait a minute. And then in the Vatican, there's two giant mushroom fountains in Vatican City. And there's kind of like in a triangle sort of thing. There's a statue of a pine cone.
Yeah.
Now, the pine cone represents the pineal gland, your third eye, which gets squeegeed off by the mushroom, so you can shake hands with the universe, phone home, see God, blah, blah, blah.
So is it possible that the reason that they kept it outlawed, or it still is even outlawed, is maybe
to keep you stupid?
Yeah, maybe they don't want people to be like,
so they can have their control. The scum of the earth that have control. Yes, that's how they keep it.
Well, the funny thing is, this sounds a lot like Jim Morrison. Because that's kind of what he thought. He was yelling at people, they got to wake up and stuff.
A lot of people forget his dad was head of the Navy during the Gulf of Tonkin, during Vietnam.
Yeah.
And he's singing songs like Land Ho and Unknown Soldier.
Yeah,
a guy had balls that you had to use. You had a wheelbarrow for him.
Right. There was a lot of people that were kind of wondered about that whole California contingency, because a lot of them came from military families, apparently.
But then back then, because the populations was smaller, and everybody was connected to the military.
Right.
Even my dad was in Vietnam.
In Vietnam,
I'm connected to that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of those '60s things. But so, where do you think Maine would be better with more legalization? Let people figure it out on their own, or are you still?
Well, always look for yourself. And I'm always. That's one of the things I say at the end of every podcast. Don't look for yourself. I'm just a fun babbling lecturer.
Yeah.
But psychedelics are proven. There's MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. Rick Doblin. Look what they've done for veterans. Speaking of the military, getting rid of PTSD and a lot of veterans and a lot of other people. There's ibogaine for narcotic addiction and ayahuasca. We know the story of Ron White's been talking for years now about ayahuasca helping him quit drinking. There's just plethora of stories.
Exactly.
And the evidence is a mountain high, and that's why they buried it, and that's why they made, and that's why they helped destroy this. Because love all of a sudden turned into, fuck it.
Well, that's the funny.
Because
right.
whatever.
I read a book about that when I was in college at a smaller environmental school that was all about all of the stuff, and that was those treatments for PTSD. This was in the 60s and the 70s. And then I was like, this is weird. I've never heard any. And it was like, took about 30 years before they're like, oh, we're talking about it again. I mean, but it's kind of the same thing that it just seems like maybe it's also, if there's no financial gain, then they won't invest in it, and there's all those hoops to jump through. It's a complicated story. Why don't you come back? We'll talk more about it another day. Yeah. So we've got to roll out to our next guest, but stick with us. I want to thank you so much, Wayne. Look for him online. Check out his podcast. It's on YouTube, Waning Interest with
the Waning
Y.
Interest podcast, which I shortened to the WHIP.
And to the WHIP. Subscribe. We'll be right back. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.